Howdy y'all, I'm Ice Gold, and today I wanted to talk about a bit of an issue that my school specifically encounters in PvP, and that is our card library issue. And this realistically has existed for a while now, but ever since around the time Caramel came out, the issue has gotten much worse, and I think that it's about time the developers looked into some of these spells and maybe made some of them a little more useful. I think that would be real nice if they could do that. So I'm sure you know I love to talk about Frostbite and how it's Ice's only card at max level PvP at least. I don't know how it translates elsewhere, but effectively what this card does is it's a pretty good overtime. It does good damage over time, and I like it. I like this card a lot. I think it is valued well. 5 pips for about 630-ish damage. I think that's fine. And yeah, I like that Ice has a good mid-pip overtime that we can use. But this is really our only card that we can use at max level PvP, because all of our others have received nerfs in some form, reworks that make them unusable, or they are just flat out banned, and I'll go over quite a few of those. So our other best card is obviously Abominable Weaver. It is a really good offense-defense move. It does pretty decent damage and then puts a tower shield on us. And you know, I like this move. I like this card a lot. It's something that you can use in a pinch if you need to, but the nerf that happened to Abominable Weaver was, first, it went from 950 to 1150 base damage and a minus 75% universal shield back in the good old days, down to what you see now, except more recently, this year, they tacked on a second Shadow Pip to use the spell. And I could really go on for a while about why making these cost 2 shads is not exactly the best idea, but that's a concept for another video too. But all you need to really know here is that Abominable Weaver is our only usable shad at really any level that has shads, which I think it's just max right now, but this is our only shadow hit, and it has been nerfed severely since its original inception, and its original form was not at all balanced. The damage that it did and the shield was just crazy, but I thought it was relatively balanced after it got nerfed the first time. I have videos from back then where, you know, I played around with this, and I thought it was fine. You know, like, it did need some balancing, but it was the addition of the second shad that just had me a little, I guess, unhappy, because Ice's whole identity, pretty much this whole time, as long as Abominable Weaver has existed, is basically the tried and true Frostbite into Weaver combo. And that's because, you know, Weaver is our only good burst damage hit. And, you know, I'll go into why the other ones suck. So let's go ahead and look at those. Winter Moon. This used to be a staple. It used to be 5 pips, and it would do 495 base damage and add the stun. But now it costs 6 pips, and I have to switch my pips in the middle of this just so I can use it. And it does, you know, marginally higher damage with the same utility. And the main appeal of the old Winter Moon was its lower pip cost. You know, like 5 pips for pretty solid damage and a stun, I thought was fine, you know, but now it costs more and its damage went up somewhat accordingly, but you can't combo this anymore, and I think that's a big issue with it. You can't Winter Moon into a Scion, for example, when you're in Shrike, which, you know, that's and I could really go into why Scion is our only usable gambit if we're not doing trap stack, which I know some people do. But yeah, overall, Winter Moon used to be a really, really good card that Ice had, but it got nerfed and its pip cost increased, meaning it's most Ices just pack 1, just so that way they can have a decent hidden stun in their main deck. But I'm gonna be honest, y'all, I think that is where Ice's main deck card library kind of just ends. We have Blighthound now, which is good if you're going against the death, and I have my own strat with this, but not everybody falls for it, and when they don't, you have to set up something else. The whole MO of Blighthound is that its base form doesn't do as much damage, but its conditional does. And it's that conditional that you have to sort of feed off of in order to stay ahead. And when people, don't take the bait, you have to set up Frostbites, Tamaujis, A-bombs, if you have Shads. But you can't spam these anymore, which does set Ice back considerably. Yeah, it's not like we have any good mid-pip burst damage hits. With Moon's nerf and A-bomb's second Shad attached to it. We do have a very good Scion, but it's like that is kind of about it. It's like you set that up, you take it with I guess however many buffs, but some people will have shield counters, some people will pack Earthquake just to counter shield gambits, and when that happens, it's like you're back to square one. Like, what do you do? Yeah, it's like Ice has a lot of cards, but they all have counters that are better than the cards themselves. And don't get me wrong, Ice has really, really good sustainability. We can, stay alive for a long time. We have Brace to augment our high resist. We have plenty of shields. We have more bubbles than any other school can have, which is really the only thing Ice has going for it. Yeah, as you can tell, most of what I'm hitting with comprises of Scion, Weaver, and Frostbite, if people don't put any curses on me, so I can't use Blighthound. So let me talk about all of the PvP ban spells that Ice has. And realistically, we should start with this one, Polar Swarm. Now, this card used to be a staple in PvP. You used to, Ice Wizards would pack this card because it's a 3-pip overtime. And when you're using a 3-pip overtime, it's like Frostbite. If you wanted to use an overtime back then, you would use Frostbite for damage and Polar Swarm for utility. And there are situations where the overtime utility is more desirable than the overtime damage. And with Ice, Ratbeard made the choice for us. We can only use Frostbite. And, like, sure, it does good damage, but its pip cost can be considered high when you're going for a specific combo. Like, if I want to Frostbite into a Scion in Shrike, for example, I will need to pip conserve this and then Scion, which I can't do anything out of, by the way. And I mean, with these 170 builds that I've been looking at, pip conserve might be a thing of the past. Just a quick little spoiler. But yeah, it is become much harder to combo Frostbite into other hits, and that's where I think Polar Swarm could come in handy, but it's banned. So it's like, if I wanted to just get an overtime onto somebody to stop them from shielding, I could use Polar Swarm. I think having this back for Ice would be really, really great. But I think that the developers are going to be hesitant to add this card back, and the reason being is they have been stuck on this new Rochambeau identity type thing, and Ice's identity is shielding, and Fire, whose identity is damage overtimes, in other words, spells like Polar Swarm and Frostbite, is supposed to hard counter us. So much as we need this card, the developers will not budge and give it to us again, which it's kind of hypocritical of them if they let Death keep Black Widow and they don't let us have this staple of a card back. That's just the Wiz design team for y'all. It's kind of a given at this point that despite Ice really needing a card like this to stay ahead in this meta, we're not going to get it. We just are not going to get it back. And I think it would really help us if we could get this back, because right now Ice really only has one strategy if you're not doing trap stack, and that is basically just chip them down. You frostbite a lot, you weaver a lot, you blighthound a lot if they get curses onto you. But that's kind of what we're reduced to. We're a mono strategy school if we're not doing trap stack. So having a spell like Polar Swarm back could allow Ice to augment it into our strategies and let us use our gambits more efficiently. I could see, Polar Swarm into Abominable Weaver, getting us out of a rut here and there. It would be similar to Death's Black Widow into Grim Reader, that type of deal. So yeah, I think Polar Swarm is a really good card for Ice to have back. Now the next card that I wanted to talk about was honestly inherently broken back in the day and did deserve to get banned, and that is the spell Icebird. And Icebird, as you can see, it would do honestly a pretty sizable amount of damage, and then it would give us a 40 blade. And, people had their rightful complaints about that. And as an Ice, I think having these hidden buff spells back for, honestly, every school, I wouldn't even mind seeing some of that back. But it's like, there are a lot of schools that have these hidden buffs that Ice just really doesn't have. We used to have this and another card called Frozen Bats, which I don't believe I have, but the Frozen Bats card would put a 35 trap on the target, so it was just another basic hit and buff, but with a trap. But, Fire has Nap the Scare, which is basically just what old Fire Beetle was, except it puts on just overtime traps, so it's less, oppressive. But, Fire has that. Storm still has their Rain Beetle pet that they can just use and work with a lot. But yeah, the bottom line is that some schools have these hit and buff cards and others don't, and Ice doesn't. So I think having a hit and buff card could help Ice a lot. I think it would be nice if we could have something that did that. I know it technically wouldn't fit with our identity or whatever, but Ice is just not in a good spot right now, and I think that having a hit and buff would be kind of nice. And honestly, at this point, I'm not even gonna lie, team, I would take a hit and shield card as well, because as you can see, Ice only has one hit and shield card, and that is Frost Beetle's conditional. And I don't know about you, but I think if Ice's identity is gonna be shielding, I would like to have a spell somewhere in here. Maybe it could be Frozen Bats, I don't know, but just a spell that cost, 2 pips and would put, I don't know, just a shield on us. I think that would be really good. It would be kind of like a cheap offense-defense move, and Ice could really make use of that. I also think that having a 4-pip spell that did the same, I think Ice could really work with that. There's this one treasure card, I think, called Crystal Spider. Yeah, this. And it's a mostly useless hit, but if it took a damage hit and it went down like maybe, 100 damage on the base, but it gave the caster maybe a 40 shield, I think you would see Ices use this, because it would do some okay damage, but it would also shield them, and I think that would be pretty important. It would help Ice play into their identity as the shielding school, and it would give us a nice little shield breaker, because currently the only hidden shield that we have that I would call viable is Weaver, and you've already heard me talk about that. And we do have our Golem spell. This I think used to be called Cold Iron, but it's Storm and Fire specific, and honestly we already performed decently well against both of these schools, so not really interested in seeing another one of those that has specifics for 2 schools. But if Crystal Spider were to do maybe I don't know, 350 damage base, and then give us a tower shield, I think that would be super beneficial for ice. Now the last thing that I want to go into is lore spells, and you'll notice that pretty much every other school has a staple lore spell that they need to have in their deck. For fire, it's Hephaestus, you need that hidden bubble, and then Brimstone is also good. And then for storm, it's imperative that you have Berry Surprise. For myth, you know, the Divum strat requires it. And then you have spells like Ninja Pigs and Athena Battle Sight, which are good in their own right. And then for life, you have Life's Divum, obviously. And then Pigsy is another good heal overtime spell, even after the recent nerf. And then I can't really think of a lore spell for death that they need off the top of my head, but death doesn't have a library problem anyway, you know, like, it has cards like Banshee, Vampire, all of those, you know, Arc 1 spells that are useful, you know? It's like, when am I ever going to use the Snow Serpent? It's like, I can't gambit a trap on my target if I don't have a trap on my target, and I don't use traps anyway. Like, I have this fuel, but I'm not going to have it when I get my 170 deck, so it's like cards like that are just honestly useless. And so yeah, it's like death just doesn't have a library problem, even though they don't have any staple lore spells. And then balance, I wouldn't say has any super important lore spells either, but you know, it's balance. I can make a whole video talking about what about them needs to get nerfed. But for ice, we don't have any good lore spells. And it's for a variety of reasons. Either the pip cost is too high, or the effect is just not good. Look at this. Look at this. This spell should have never been added to the game. 230 health per shield sacrificed. I would be getting rid of shields on myself. Getting rid of shields on myself is not a good idea. I don't want to do that. Especially not for, you know, 230 health per shield. That's nothing, especially because ice has no outgoing pins. So this spell is, you know, thoroughly useless. It has, like, honestly kind of an interesting spellement path, where it gives a protected absorb for almost 1,000 damage, but you know, one shield counter and it's over. you don't even think about packing that. What else do we have? By the way, this thing is this and Snow Pig. These are our only two quote-unquote 4-pip spells. And then Snow Pig, it has a nice mechanic. It can push a curse to the target, and it's just that the damage sucks. I would never use this. I wouldn't even think about using this unless I was against like a fire who E-freated me and I just happen to have this on hand. But it's like, at that point, why not just wand it off? These two spells are a mess, and it's all that we have at the 4-pip range. Deer Mouse Trap was sort of a breath of fresh air for ice, because it did good damage and it left a 40% trap. Now, a 40% trap, that's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie to you, a 40% buff is really, really good. The problem is this: it costs too many pips for it to be viable. I tried experimenting with this before, but it's really just not good enough. And I think if it were, you know, 2 pips and an ice pip, it would be absolutely worth. Because, like, obviously it would take a bit of a damage hit, but you would be able to use this back to back. And I think that would be really important. I think that being able to do quick damage in rapid succession is something that I struggles with, and that's why I try to use Blighthound. But it only works if I'm against like a death or if somebody banshees me. So having a guaranteed way to do quick damage with a lore spell would make this worth the grind, and I think that the developers should really consider making this a 4-pip spell. Ansem Fomori is PvP banned. It does actually have a path that isn't, but it's a storm-specific mantle, so not worth it anyway. Reindeer Knight I could actually farm for, but even though it would give me a 60 shield at the max tier, it's just not that great, because it's like one wand hit would just offset it, and It's like, why did you use it, you know? Deathly Depths, if you want to call this a lore spell, it's, you know, again, it's just storm specific, and, you know, it could be good if these were universal, but they're not, so. And then Count Crocula, obviously just an AoE. And then Winter Moon, this is the only one that I would really recommend getting at all. It's, as aforementioned, it's a neat little hit and stun that you could use in conjunction with Weaver, but it's just not that great otherwise. And then that's all we have. That is all that Ice has. We just don't have any lore spells, and it's a struggle. If we had a good lore spell that we could spam, I guess, like every other school does, then I think Ice would not be in as bad of a place as it is. I think that being able to have an extensive card library would be very, very helpful for Ice, and I think it's something that the developers should really look into doing. I don't know. I hope they take this video seriously if they see it and try to fix it up, because currently we're in a meta where monostrat schools have matchups where we just lose. Like, if I see a balance in this new meta, I am just going to escape quit and take my loss, because currently Ice does not have a strat that can counterbalance. Being able to spend this might do it. We might be able to offset their damage, but I don't think it's going to happen if it stays at 5 pips. So, but yeah, it's almost like 5:30 a.m. where I'm at. I had a lot of work to do yesterday, so I think I'm going to wrap up here. Thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm, and I'll see y'all later.